The year is 432 AD. Rome is battered, weakened, and scarred from centuries of invasions. The Western Roman Empire teeters on collapse, and the Church is desperately trying to prove itself as the one steady force in a crumbling world. The Pope, the man considered the vicar of Christ on earth, was supposed to be the shining example of holiness, untouchable by scandal. But then came whispers. Whispers that Pope Sixtus III, the Bishop of Rome himself, had crossed a forbidden line, accused not of heresy or politics, but of something far more personal, far more damning. He was put on trial for seducing a nun. This was no ordinary rumor. To accuse the Pope of breaking the sacred vows of chastity at a time when celibacy was becoming the cornerstone of priestly virtue was nothing short of explosive. And when he finally stood in court, Sixtus did not deny, nor did he confess. Instead, he reached back to the words of Jesus Christ himself and left the judges stunned into silence. Stay with me until the end, because you'll hear the shocking defense Pope Sixtus delivered, and why this scandal remains one of the most mysterious and overlooked episodes in papal history. To understand the scandal, we need to step back into the world of the 5th century. Rome had been sacked by the Visigoths just 2 decades earlier, and the once mighty empire was a shadow of itself. The Church was rapidly growing in power, filling the vacuum left by failing emperors. But with great authority came the question of morality. Celibacy had been debated in the Church since the 4th century. Bishops and priests were urged to abstain, but enforcement was shaky. In practice, many clergymen ignored the rules. Still, when it came to the Pope, the ultimate representative of holiness, expectations were higher. Any hint of sexual scandal could shake the faithful to their core. So when rumors spread that Pope Sixtus III had seduced a nun, it wasn't just gossip. It was a direct attack on the credibility of the papacy itself. And here's the twist. The charges were serious enough that the Pope himself was dragged into a church court. Think about that. The man who sat on the throne of St. Peter, suddenly standing trial like any other accused sinner. But what exactly happened inside that courtroom? The accusation was both scandalous and symbolic. Nuns were considered brides of Christ, women who had given their lives entirely to God. For the Pope, the spiritual father of all Christians, to seduce one was unthinkable. It blurred the line between sacred devotion and human temptation in the most dangerous way possible. The charge cast doubt not only on Sixtus's personal morality, but on the very institution he led. If the Pope himself could not resist such desires, what did that say about the holiness of the Church? We don't know much about the nun herself, her name, her role, or how the accusation came to light. 5th century sources are frustratingly thin, but her symbolic role in the trial was immense. She represented both the vulnerability of women in the Church and the fragility of the Pope's authority. The court assembled, likely composed of bishops and church officials, ready to hear the case. The expectation was simple. Pope or not, if the evidence was strong, Sixtus would fall. But what happened next turned the trial into legend. The bishops seated in judgment, the murmurs echoing through the chamber, all eyes fixed on Sixtus III. The charge had been read. The question hung in the air. Was the Pope guilty of seducing a nun? Sixtus rose to defend himself, and instead of lengthy explanations or legal maneuvering, he delivered a single line. He quoted directly from the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 7, the story of the adulterous woman condemned by the Pharisees. Jesus, unmoved by their demands for punishment, simply said, "He that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone." Sixtus turned those same words on his judges. "Let you who are without sin," he declared, "cast the first stone." The courtroom froze. It was a moment of brilliance, or perhaps arrogance. Was this a confession in disguise, admitting he too had sinned? Or was it a devastating rebuke, exposing the hypocrisy of those who dared to judge him? After all, how many of the men on that bench had broken their own vows of chastity in secret? The answer was never made clear. But one thing was certain: the tide of the trial had shifted. Before we get to the verdict, and whether Pope Sixtus was condemned or cleared, if you're enjoying this dive into the scandals of the early papacy, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you won't miss our upcoming stories about the hidden controversies of the Vatican's past. All right, back to the trial. The judges were shaken. Sixtus's defense had turned the moral spotlight away from himself and onto them. Could they, in good conscience, claim to be without sin? The truth is, many clerics in the 5th century lived lives far from the ideal. Concubines, affairs, even fathering children, these were not uncommon. To punish Sixtus would risk exposing their own hypocrisies. And so, after weighing the case, the court declared that no proof could be found against him. The trial ended. The Pope was cleared. But was this justice or self-preservation? After the trial, Sixtus III remained Pope until his death in 440. Remarkably, his pontificate is remembered as mostly blemish-free. He was known for his writings, particularly an essay on the virtues of chastity, a strange irony given the charges once leveled against him. He oversaw the construction of several churches in Rome, including the Basilica of Santa Maria Maggiore, one of the most significant Marian churches in the world. His papacy was marked by stability, theological clarity, and architectural achievement. And yet, the shadow of the trial lingered. The Church did not erase it from memory. Instead, it stood as a reminder that even the Pope was not beyond accusation. So, was Sixtus truly innocent, or simply untouchable? Historians remain divided. Some argue that the charges were fabricated, perhaps by political enemies eager to weaken him. Others believe that Sixtus's defense, invoking Christ's words, was too clever to be coincidental. It suggested not so much denial as deflection. What's undeniable is the symbolism. The Pope, supposedly the holiest man alive, placed on trial for seducing a nun, only to escape by reminding his judges of their own corruption. It's a story that raises timeless questions about power, morality, and human weakness. And it foreshadows later papal scandals, the mistresses, the illegitimate children, the corruption that would eventually spark the Reformation 1,000 years later. Sixtus's case reminds us that the tension between divine office and human frailty has been with the papacy since the beginning. In the end, Pope Sixtus III walked free, his legacy intact. The trial faded into the background, overshadowed by his accomplishments. But the story survives because it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What does it mean when the man meant to embody holiness faces the same temptations as everyone else? Does quoting scripture excuse a crime? Or does it simply reveal that power can bend justice to its will? Perhaps the truth about Sixtus will never be known, but his trial stands as a testament to the fact that no office, not even the papacy, can escape suspicion. If you enjoyed this story of scandal, power, and intrigue, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive into the secrets of history. Because sometimes, the past isn't as holy or as innocent as we like to believe.